Our skies are full of mysteries. Unidentified flying objects secretly investigated by government agencies all over Europe for decades.
There was a cover-up in the early 1950s because pilots were seeing strange things. They couldn't explain all of them, but they didn't want that information reaching the public.
For the first time, we've collated sightings and reports from across an entire continent. Some experts insist many sightings have rational explanations. But some continue to defy understanding.
I had never seen anything like it. I never saw anything like it after that. And if you say to me, what do I think I was looking at, I haven't the vaguest idea.
Are these visitors from other worlds or natural phenomena? And do our European governments know more than they ever revealed to us? The answer may lie in the untold stories of the UFO files of Europe. Amidst the thousands of UFO sightings, some have been more influential than others. Strange events surrounding a NATO exercise changed the way Western governments deal with their UFO cases. The lives of scores of witnesses are affected by a metallic tentacled object hovering over them for almost an hour. And a Romanian village is blacked out, and a wedding ruined after lights are seen in the sky. Alfena, Portugal, 10th of September, 1990. A group of children spot a strange UFO hovering just 50 meters off the ground. The sighting terrifies residents. And brings notoriety to this small, close-knit community.
This event in Alfena, since 1990, is remembered as an extraordinary event.
4 photographs taken that day continue to defy explanation, and the case remains one of the most baffling in Portuguese history. It is more than 20 years since the Alfena UFO incident, but strange events that shocked the community haven't been forgotten.
This case is very important because it was witnessed by dozens of people. It all started on a Monday, 8:30 a.m.
A group of children on their way to school are the first to see the flying object.
It was a round-shaped, very bright, shiny object, flying very low, and the children kept asking, "What is it? What is it?"
But this is barely the beginning of an extraordinary morning in Alfena. Shortly after the children's sighting, the UFO is spotted by local construction workers.
Pegaram em algumas pedras e tentaram atirar o objeto.
The workers threw the stones like in a basic animal response. They thought, is this going to land?
As the UFO moves over the central part of town, residents begin to fear what may be about to happen. Manuel Costa first sees the object near his home.
Assustei-me de ter estava o meu neto aqui e disse, ai filho, se calhar vem botar bombas aqui.
Costa's daughter, Paulina, recalls the events vividly.
Eu estava aqui precisamente neste sítio, quando reparei que nesta direção assim, vinha bastante alto uma coisa espelhar muito brilhante, sempre assim nesta direção, aqui, e à medida que se ia aproximando ia baixando de altitude, sempre a baixar de altitude, sempre em direção, sempre por aqui abaixo. Assim, deu a sensação de que ali naquele local ia baixar.
But the UFO doesn't land. Instead it moves towards the football field, and panic spreads through the town. Local photojournalist Manuel Gomes is eating breakfast at a cafe when he hears about the strange events happening in the sky.
Someone called him, say, please come, please come. He came outside, he saw the object, grabbed a 35mm camera.
Gomes races through the town with his camera, desperate to get a photo of the UFO. At 9:15 a.m., 45 minutes after the children first saw the object, Gomes arrives at the football field.
É num desses momentos que o senhor Manuel Gomes, fotógrafo, faz conjunto, uma sequência de 4 fotos.
This is what he saw.
"22 years on from the event, UFO investigator Francisco Correa has come to the location where the iconic photos were taken. He is meeting a key witness, football club director David Silva.
Aquilo era feito, material seria feito ou alumínio ou inox, porque na altura havia um dia de sol, portanto o sol estava no nascente e batia no aparelho, no objeto e refletia.
After hovering for about a minute, the object disappears over the horizon. The following day, a team of investigators arrive in Alfena to gather witness statements. It becomes clear that witnesses are puzzled by what they've seen.
As pessoas tentavam, digamos, definir aquilo que estavam a ver. Uma delas é que o objeto parecia uma tartaruga com pernas. Os trabalhadores da construção civil compararam o objeto a uma betoneira, portanto, que é um artefacto que eles utilizam no seu trabalho no dia a dia.
Some provide drawings of the object, but one man has the key piece of evidence: Manuel Gomes, the photographer.
Pareceu-nos na altura e depois subsequentemente que era uma pessoa perfeitamente equilibrada, que não estaria à procura de publicidade, porque se disponibilizou desde logo a ceder-nos os negativos, e isto é muito importante.
Investigators realize that analysis of the photographs may help to unlock the mystery. The first pressing question: are the photographs genuine? Photography expert Paul Ellis has studied the images.
I must say it is a peculiar looking object, and these photographs don't, to my mind, have any initial feel of darkroom trickery. One of the reasons I think these might be authentic photographs is simply that they're colour. Colour photographs are much more difficult to fake and trick. An important clue to its authenticity, or possible authenticity, is in the enlargement, because the enlargement shows real detail of highlights. The shadows are still in the right place. This would be really hard to fake in the darkroom. I really feel this is a genuine object in the sky. No idea what the object is, but it does have a sense of authenticity about it.
So if the photos are genuine, what was in the sky that day? Investigators explore the possibility that the UFO could have been a weather balloon. But meteorologist Thomas Schaffernacker is not convinced.
It certainly doesn't look like a standard weather balloon to me. For example, it has these strange tentacles hanging from the bottom. I certainly wouldn't expect to see those on a standard weather balloon.
And there is something about the UFO's behavior that makes investigators think that this is not simply a balloon blowing in the breeze.
O objeto tem conjunto de evoluções e de paragens, portanto, ele movimenta-se, mas também tem momentos em que está estacionário.
But the most interesting thing is that it hovered in the same position for a very long time. Now, a weather balloon tends to go up or be carried by the wind. Anybody knows that. If you let a balloon out, it will just be taken away. This one stayed there for a very long time.
So what was this object? Appearing to be solid and metallic, maneuvering at low altitude above the town. Researchers finally turned their attention to the military.
The other possibility, of course, is that this was some form of drone. Drones are universally known as unmanned aerial vehicles used by the military to carry out a whole range of intelligence-gathering operations.
Chris Yates is an aviation analyst who sees similarities between the Alfena UFO and unmanned aerial vehicles.
UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, are highly maneuverable. They can be moved to any given position that you have a desire to monitor.
Yates believes that an untrained eye could be confused if confronted with a military drone.
UAVs are some of the strangest aircraft flying. We're talking about aerial vehicles that don't conform necessarily to the shapes that we've all become accustomed to in terms of aircraft and helicopters. So it would have come as a surprise to villagers to see one of these things hovering over, manoeuvring around.
In 1990, there were 7 NATO air bases in Portugal. Investigators wanted to know whether a drone or a UAV had been flown over Alfena that day.
Foi possível, na altura, também contactarmos a Força Aérea Portuguesa, no sentido de tentarmos saber se em território português, naquele momento, haveria algum tipo de artefacto voador a ser experimentado, por exemplo, no âmbito da NATO.
They didn't have to wait long for a reply.
Que, pelo menos em Portugal, naquele momento, não havia objetos que estavam a ser experimentados, objetos, digamos, do âmbito militar.
Despite a thorough investigation, to this day, nobody knows what terrified the residents of Alfena.
Digamos que, assim, em termos de remate, poderemos dizer que estamos na presença, ainda hoje, de um fenómeno aéreo que continua não identificado, aquilo que vulgarmente nós chamamos de OVNI.
The Cold War, a time of ultimate tension. The early 1950s saw the Soviet forces grow ever stronger and threaten to overrun Europe. Everyone was carefully watching and jealously guarding their airspace.
During the height of the Cold War, the Russians were coming down, they were testing our defences the whole time. Things really did get quite tense here.
With both sides fully aware that a misidentification of their own aircraft could lead to the Third World War.
Up until now, the UK government has paid little attention to flying saucers, but that's about to change. Operation Mainbrace, Western Europe, 14th to the 25th of September 1952. The government finds it hard to ignore what happens as the NATO training exercise unfolds.
During Operation Mainbrace, there was a whole series of sightings of flying saucers, not only by some of the crews of the aircraft carriers who were taking part in the exercise, but also by some of the Royal Air Force crews.
The sightings were to produce a radical change in the Ministry of Defence's attitude to unidentified flying objects.
That's when you see some of the governments of Western Europe taking the subject of UFOs very, very seriously. They wanted to know, was there any chance that these things could be from behind the Iron Curtain?
It's the last 2 weeks of September 1952. Operation Mainbrace sees the full force of NATO's air and sea power patrolling the waters around Northern Europe. Journalist and academic David Clarke is an authority on the mysterious goings-on during this time.
It was a simulated exercise. What would happen if the Russians ever attacked, coming over the Arctic Circle with their aircraft and their ships?
Bornholm, Denmark, 13th of September, 1952. Danish destroyer Vilmos is on patrol as part of Operation Mainbrace. Lieutenant Commander Smith Jensen, another officer, and a press photographer are on the ship's bridge. Suddenly, they hear a whistling noise. Smith Jensen's son, Niels, recalls what his father told him about that night.
They hear this noise and look up and see this 3 spots, green, white spots coming in a triangle. It was 3 lights hanging together. It was something that was one item.
Emitting a bluish glow, the object zips over their heads. Its speed is estimated at more than 1,500 kilometers per hour. 3 seconds later, it's out of sight. Immediately, Smith Jensen races below deck to the officers' mess.
He goes down to the first commander and tells the story, and they all laugh at him. But then the other people come down and verify the story.
Several journalists reporting on the NATO exercise were on the ship that night and were keen to find out more. Ole Henningsen is a veteran researcher at the Scandinavian UFO Information Society in Denmark.
One of the newspaper guys later on, they asked him, could you have hit this object? Could you have shooten it down? Smith Jensen, he laughed and he said, no, of course I couldn't, because there was a press photographer right beside me, and he couldn't even take a photograph. It was away for only a few seconds.
What could have been moving so fast across the sky? Among the obvious explanations is a NATO aircraft taking part in the exercise, or a Soviet plane shadowing the military maneuvers.
Well, they ask, of course, NATO, was this something coming from them, or was it a Russian item that they didn't know about? There was a lot of speculations, but nobody came with an answer. Nobody had an answer.
Just 6 days later, with Operation Mainbrace in full swing, there's yet another peculiar UFO sighting. RAF Topcliffe, England, 19th of September, 1952. It is shortly before 11 a.m. RAF personnel watch a Meteor aircraft coming into land. They spot something unusual, following about 8 kilometers behind it.
And they thought initially, oh no, there's been some kind of accident. It's the cowling from the aircraft or something from the aircraft that's come away and that's fallen to earth, because this thing appeared to be following the aircraft and then descending. As they watched, they realised that this wasn't the case, this was an actual flying object, and it appeared to fall in like a falling leaf motion.
The silvery object sways back and forth like a pendulum at an altitude of about 5,000 meters. But as the Meteor begins circling, the disc-shaped UFO stops and hovers in the air. It starts to rotate.
And then it just went zoom and disappeared at some fantastic speed, and at that moment they knew this wasn't something that they'd seen before.
Nobody can find a rational explanation for the sighting. No cowling or parachute descends in the area. The experienced airmen watching claim it looks nothing like any aircraft they've ever seen, and it seems to move faster than a shooting star. The media attention the sighting receives has a lasting impact on the government's approach to the subject of UFOs.
This was before there was any restrictions on Air Force personnel talking to the media. It got immediately into the press. The pilots who'd seen this thing were interviewed by the national media, and the government then was forced into a position it had to do something, or it had to at least appear on the surface to be taking this subject seriously. So Operation Mainbrace was a real turning point, and that was the moment at which the British government thought, we do need to take this subject seriously, it's not going away. Whatever is behind this, we've got to keep monitoring it. And that's when the British government sets up a highly secret unit in air intelligence that kept tabs on this subject.
Air intelligence soon have other cases to investigate. USS Franklin D. Roosevelt, North Sea, 20th of September, 1952.
On this aircraft carrier, there was a photographer from the American news media, Wallace Litwin. He reported that he'd taken a photograph of what he thought was a flying saucer.
The UFO is a white spherical object seen moving in the sky behind the fleet. In 1974, UFO investigator Ole Henningsen tracks down Wallace Litwin and receives a letter describing exactly what he'd seen that day.
Well, Mr. Litwin, he sent me a letter, and he writes, when I had taken the 3 or 4 shots, I went below to the officers' lounge, where I jokingly announced to the correspondents there that I had shot a flying saucer.
When you look at the photographs today, they're pretty indistinct. You can hardly identify the object that he said was the flying saucer. But the people on the aircraft carrier were quite concerned about what he said he'd seen, quite naturally, because this was a secret military exercise.
So what could Litwin have seen that got the military so worried? The letter reveals the photographer initially thought he'd pictured one of the weather balloons regularly released by the FD Roosevelt and her sister ships. But none of those balloons could possibly have been in the area at that time. Whatever the truth of the Litwin photograph, one thing's indisputable. There were many witnesses to UFOs in Western Europe during the month of September 1952. What could possibly explain this surge of sightings? Perhaps a freak rush of astronomical phenomena while Operation Mainbrace was underway?
In the case of Mainbrace, I don't think we can look for an astronomical explanation. Most of these sightings apparently occurred during the daytime, and there really isn't anything astronomical that's that bright in the daytime sky. And we can't explain it by orbital debris, because this was 1952, and that was 5 years before the first satellite went into orbit, so it can't be a satellite coming down or rockets coming down that have launched satellites into orbit.
People were becoming more aware of the possibility of life on other planets.
What was growing in the background was a public belief, massive public belief, in aliens from outer space, and that was encouraged by popular culture. 1951, we had the day that the Earth stood still, which was all about an alien civilization that sent an emissary to Earth. But in the 1950s, and many scientists believe that there may be intelligent life on Mars. So it wasn't such a huge leap to imagine that they could be visiting us. And reflecting the international tensions of the Cold War, people naturally expected the aliens to be hostile, because it was almost a reflection of what they expected to happen if the Russians ever invaded.
The wave of sightings in 1952 is far from over. Just a month later, a UFO spotted over Britain brings suggestions of a government cover-up. It's October 1952. Over the past 30 days, many witnesses across Europe have reported UFO sightings. The wave of strange events coincides with a major military exercise. There are sightings from both military ships and Royal Air Force personnel, which forces the UK government to take the whole subject of UFOs more seriously than ever before. But yet another, even more puzzling UFO mystery is about to unfold. Little Rissington, England, 21st of October, 1952. RAF Flight Lieutenant Michael Swinney is a highly experienced pilot examiner and trainer at the military's Central Flying School. His working life is routine, until the day he almost runs headlong into 3 flying saucers.
I had never seen anything like it. I never saw anything like it after that. And if you say to me, what do I think I was looking at? I haven't the vaguest idea, and I wish I had.
On that eventful afternoon 60 years ago, Flight Lieutenant Swinney is flying with Naval Officer David Crofts. Their planned sortie will take them to an altitude of around 10,000 meters, flying a triangular cross-country route.
We climbed up through some cloud and eventually broke out into clear weather at about, I think, 14,000, 15,000 feet. And it was shortly after that that I noticed in the windscreen, directly in front, 3 circular white or off-white objects.
Swinney initially fears that he is seeing fellow airmen floating down on parachutes.
I grabbed control of the aircraft because I thought if I wasn't careful, I'd go straight through the middle of them.
But the objects moved to the right.
We were trying desperately to find some reason for seeing what we were seeing.
Swinney and Crofts radio into the control tower and are told to stand by.
They had no idea what to tell me. There didn't appear to be any sort of standard operating procedure at that time, in case people did call in to say, I have 3 unidentified aircraft in front of me, give me some instructions.
They were absolutely perfect, translucent objects, no sign of propulsion systems, no windows, in echelon formation, and they watched them for some time.
The pilots watched the objects for 10 minutes, but eventually they vanish.
I looked away for a matter of a second or 2, and when I looked back, there was nothing to be seen. They had just disappeared.
What the pilots didn't know at the time was that the UFOs had also been picked up by ground-controlled interception radar.
That one fact has always come back to me, and I've said to myself, just believe in what you saw, because somebody else with some pretty high-powered equipment saw it at the same time.
The military takes the incident very seriously. In the tense international climate, all unidentified radar blips are treated as potentially hostile.
Fighter Command scrambled aircraft to go and investigate, but these things disappeared off the radar screen before any action could be taken.
The scrambled jets failed to make any contact. Swinney and Crofts make an uneventful flight back to Little Rissington Airfield. But the incident had affected them deeply.
I was told that I looked particularly shaken, as if I'd almost seen a ghost.
The Air Ministry had learned lessons from the press coverage of a UFO sighting at RAF Base Topcliffe a month earlier. To avoid further publicity, they handled this UFO case very differently.
Both the pilots were immediately separated, told not to talk to each other. A group of investigators from the Air Ministry came, interviewed them separately, took statements from them, and obviously there was some kind of investigation that was going on in the background.
The Air Ministry conducts a classified inquiry, but their conclusion is made public. There is no evidence for otherworldly UFOs. Case closed.
The Air Ministry concluded that there was no evidence of extraterrestrial craft. How they concluded that remains a mystery.
Michael Swinney has been trying to find the classified report ever since.
My big gripe is that the report that I wrote, I tried to recover and was told that because it was written when it was, 1952, that subsequently reports up to 67 or thereabouts were in fact shredded. I was never told anything.
The government never revealed the details of their investigation to the public, not even to the witnesses.
It's gone on year after year after year with no resolution in sight.
So all we're left with is that one entry, the memories of the two pilots who also made entries in their personal flying logs of the sightings.
I've just written 3 flying saucers at height confirmed by GCI.
So did the files contain information the government wasn't prepared to share? Or has the report disappeared because of simple human error?
There was a cover-up in the early 1950s, but that was simply common sense on behalf of the military. Because they thought, if we just simply say to the public at large, people are seeing these things that are called flying saucers, if you've seen one, tell us about it. And they knew that if they did that, they wouldn't get anywhere because they'd just be inundated with hundreds and hundreds of letters. So they thought, if there's any truth to this, the only way we're going to get to the bottom of it is if we concentrate on what we know is the credible evidence.
Sadly, without the original report, Swinney may never discover what it was he saw that day.
It's the thought that I had this experience 60 years ago and will never know what I saw. I mean, to me, everything would be revealed if only somebody could find my report.
In a remote Romanian village, a wedding is in full swing. Suddenly, a massive power blackout brings the celebrations crashing to a halt. When villagers go to investigate, they are greeted by a surreal sight illuminating the night sky.
Și mai mi s-a părut un neregul. Era un fenomen care nu l-am văzut niciodată în viața mea până acum.
Witnesses are captivated by the bizarre events.
Am gândit că cineva se joacă. Cineva care are o tehnologie foarte avansată.
We have here in Romania an incredible case which the world should see.
Nanești, Romania, 30th of June 2001. This remote village lies in eastern Romania. It's an important day for new bride Stella Necula and her mother Magiola Angel. At 10:30 p.m., Necula and her new husband are enjoying a wedding feast with their families. Suddenly, the festivities are interrupted when the power cuts out.
Prima dată am zis că cineva ne-a făcut o glumă. Am văzut că a trecut o oră, 2. Deja am intrat în panică și ne-am gândit și la altceva.
But this is no prank. The blackout is affecting other parts of the village. Professor Tanasake Agafets is relaxing at home with his wife.
Când deodată se întrerupe curentul și, așteptând câteva minute, ne-am gândit ce se întâmplă, să vedem dacă e numai la noi sau și la vecini.
Outside, the night sky is black and still. The power cut has plunged the entire village into darkness. Agafets takes the opportunity to look up at the stars.
Și, uitându-mă în direcția nord, am observat un obiect mișcător care se deplasa dinspre nord încoace.
What the object does next is completely unexpected.
S-a poziționat acolo și după câteva secunde a început să emită un cerc luminos întrerupt, cerc luminos care se deplasa către pământ, lărgindu-se tot mai mult, doar cu o viteză din ce în ce mai mare, până când a ajuns, eu așa am zis, că a cuprins tot satul.
At the same moment, agricultural mechanic Dumitru Jujau is cycling to his home in Nanești when he also notices the red glow in the sky.
Mă zic, ce cu ea, mă, ce cu lumina asta? Eram curios, dacă nu era lumină în tot satul, zic, ce se întâmplă oare? Se desfăcea larg, cu multe ferestre, așa, decât late. Și stătea câteva minute, stăteam și mă uitam așa, de singur.
For nearly 2 hours, the phenomenon sends strange beams of light down over the village before disappearing. Over the following days, the story is reported in the press. Romanian UFO investigators descend on the area looking for witnesses. Among them is former military sergeant George Kohal. Initially, residents are reluctant to discuss the events.
România, ca și în alte locuri, există o problemă. Oamenii nu prea vor să vorbească despre aceste fenomene observate, o parte dintre ei nu vor să vorbească, pentru că sunt interpretați de ceilalți săteni ca niște ciudați, ca oameni efectiv nebuni, care au viziuni.
But it soon becomes apparent that this was an extraordinary occurrence.
Acest caz are 7 martori oficiali care au fost intervievați, dar presupunem că există peste 50 de martori care au observat fenomenul, deci reprezintă un caz de observație în masă a unui fenomen luminos cu caracteristicile OZN.
Is it possible that the strange lights could have been caused by something not in the sky, but from within the Earth?
Zona respectivă, zona Vrancea, zona de curbură a munților Carpați, este o zonă unde se produc periodic cutremure de pământ.
Luminous aerial phenomena have been observed during some earthquakes. Most recently, during the 2009 L'Aquila earthquake in Italy.
We have a very good study in Aquila. They collected hundreds of sightings of different light phenomena before and after the earthquake.
It's thought that earthquake lights could result from intense electrical fields created by the tectonic movement of some rocks. But for this natural phenomenon to be the catalyst in Nanești, the region should have experienced seismic activity.
Doesn't mean there is no rain.
It's far too hot for water liquid clouds to form here, but instead these clouds would be made out of iron.
Iron vapor can exist at temperatures much higher than water. And because of that, things could get a little messy.
you better have an umbrella that's pretty sturdy, because the iron is going to start coating your umbrella very rapidly and making it extremely heavy and just crush that umbrella.
The sky overhead is filled with dancing curtains of color. Charged particles from the nearby star make auroras far more extreme than the northern lights on Earth. There is something even more unique about this newly discovered world. Bellerophon orbits its sun in a blistering 4.2 days.
No self-respecting planet goes around a star in 4.2 days. None of the planets in our solar system take such a short amount of time.
For scientists, the tiny orbit challenges long-held notions of how planets form.
The fact that the planet was orbiting every 4 days was a total puzzle until one night in the middle of the night I woke up and said, well, this must be proof that planets migrate inwards. They don't stay put where they are.
The key to the puzzle is found in how planets are made.
Planets are a byproduct of star formation. When stars form, they have a disk of dust and debris around them, and out of that debris, planets form.
Much of what we know comes from Hubble's Space Telescope, as it aims at regions like the Eagle Nebula. This interstellar cloud is studded with collapsing disks of dust and gas. A giant clump grows in the center of each disk. Temperatures reach a searing 18 million degrees. The same nuclear fusion that powers our sun is unleashed. The star is born. Radiation from the star generates a stellar wind that sweeps away leftover dust and debris. Some of the dust survives and remains in orbit around the newborn star. Over millions of years, the dust sticks together, forming knots that grow into asteroids, and the asteroids grow into planets. These planets migrate through the disk until they find a stable orbit. This is why Bellerophon is so close to its parent star. But one newly discovered world has found its stable orbit in a place no planet should ever go. 2001. Hubble Space Telescope is directed to an obscure star some 150 light-years away from Earth, in the constellation of Pegasus. This is the same region where Bellerophon was found 6 years earlier. Hubble is tracking another hot Jupiter, discovered by astronomer Jeff Marcy. But this one is different from Bellerophon.
You've probably heard of the planet HD 209458b. It's a terrible name.
A terrible name for a terrible place. HD 209458b has been dubbed by some as Osiris, after the Egyptian god of the dead. Osiris is over 200 times more massive than Earth. It has migrated perilously close to its sun, at a mere 4 million miles from the blazing solar surface. Osiris broils in a planetary hell. The average daily temperature on Osiris is over 2,000 degrees. Forget global warming. This is global frying, and it causes Osiris to lose an estimated 550,000 tons of air every second.
There's a leak of gas, a steady stream of hydrogen and helium, and that's making a big, huge cloud all around the planet.
Its atmosphere is bleeding into space. Scientists speculate that a colossal trail of gas spirals behind the planet for thousands of miles. OSIRIS presents an unprecedented opportunity for astronomers. Using Hubble, they analyze the alien planet's bloated atmosphere.
This is the absolutely first time where we could tell what is the composition of the atmosphere of an extrasolar planet.
Surprisingly, Hubble detects many of the basic chemicals needed for life. Sodium, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But OSIRIS is far too hot for life as we know it.
There may be other forms of life, however, that thrive on higher temperatures.
But there's no solid surface as we know it on a hot Jupiter. So this life would have to be just tiny little microbes floating around on aerosols. And on our own Earth, we have life that floats around in our atmosphere. But that life didn't start there. So life almost certainly would not exist on hot Jupiters.
Astronomers have discovered many hot Jupiters since Bellerophon was found in 1995. But conditions on these worlds rule them out as places where the drama of life can unfold. One of these gas giants is a planet that teases the rules of evolution. Astronomer Jeff Marcy discovers something shocking about a planet orbiting a star called 16 Cygnus b, located some 70 light-years away in the constellation of Cygnus, the Swan.
The planet was clearly in an elongated orbit, bringing the planet close to and then far from the host star. And this, of course, defied our expectations based on our own solar system, where all of the planets go around our sun in nearly circular orbits like phonograph grooves in a record.
Like a giant yo-yo in space, the gas giant swings back and forth across its solar system. That is like the Earth swooping 25 million miles closer to the sun, then slinging past Mars, all the way out towards Jupiter every year. And like all of the gas giants in our solar system, this yo-yo planet might have an entourage of moons. Marcy speculates that one of these moons could be similar to Earth.
And here's where the interesting story begins. Imagine a rocky moon with lakes, oceans, maybe streams and waterfalls on the surface. The moon orbiting its planet, the two of them orbiting the host star.
Unlike the airless moon that circles the Earth, this moon is a world with extreme seasons. On Earth, the seasons are caused by the tilt of our planet. Here, they are caused by the elongated orbit.
These poor planets that are in these elongated elliptical orbits suffer terrible changes in their climate throughout a year.
As they make their closest approach, the yo-yo planet and its moon are blowtorched by the star. Summer begins. The atmosphere on the Earth-like moon is savaged with raging storms. Category 5 hurricanes on Earth are tiny eddies compared to the monster vortexes that form here. The clouds thicken as the water evaporates.
temperatures rise dramatically, any water or gases would heat up, and indeed the oceans would boil into steam, so you'd end up with a big steam bath.
During the peak of the summer, the entire moon is smothered in 800-degree temperatures. This is the closest approach to the star. During its 26-month orbit, the summer season is barely 2 months long. But what a season! The planet and its moon swing away from the furnace of the star. Temperatures fall to ranges we would find temperate and comfortable. With the coming of fall, the rains return to the parched and roasted moon. Dry ocean basins are replenished, and the seas rise to form new shorelines. Tranquility prevails as the yo-yo planet and its moon slip into the deep freeze of winter. Now, over 200 million miles from the star, the daytime sky is dark. Temperatures hover around 260 degrees below. Winters are long, lasting 17 months. With the coming of spring, the sun looms large in the skies over this hapless moon as the ice cracks and melts violently. Huge icebergs calve into a stormy and fast-rising ocean. For 2 preciously short periods, during the spring thaw and the autumn rains, the climate on this Earth-like moon is balmy and comfortable. At a distance of 93 million miles from the star, roughly the same distance as Earth from the Sun, the elliptical orbit of this planet and its moon crosses an area around the star some scientists call the Goldilocks zone. The conditions here are just right for life.
If you're too close to the star, then it's too hot. If you're too far away, then it's going to be too cold and everything's going to be icy. But then if you're right in the middle, it's just right.
Every star has a Goldilocks zone. Where that zone is depends on the size and temperature of the star. In our solar system, Venus marks the inner boundary and Mars the outer boundary. Earth and its abundance of life is right in the middle. The yo-yo planet passes through the Goldilocks zone twice a year. For 3.5 months during the spring as it races inbound, and again in the fall for 3.5 months as it hurtles back into the colder reaches of space. Could life survive the conditions outside the Goldilocks zone?
There could be life forms that are smart enough to hibernate, as do animals on the Earth during the winter season. If this sounds fantastic, I offer you the tidal zones on the Earth. On the tidal zones, life proliferates, of course, near the seashore, and they do so despite tides. The water coming in, covering many of the life forms, the water going out at low tide, and yet those species survive perfectly well.
The strange cycle of the yo-yo planet's orbit creates fleeting conditions suitable for life, but also for death. Some alien planets are even more bizarre. Imagine a world that has no star to orbit. Scientists speculate that our galaxy is teeming with rogue planets, adrift in the murky lanes of interstellar space. These are orphaned worlds, planets that are booted from their solar systems by the chaos of planetary migration. Astronomers call such worlds planemos.
Planemos are planets without a star. They're just drifting through the galaxy indefinitely.
What massive force would it take to kick a planet out of the solar system?
When a young star forms with a contingent of planets around it, many of those planets gravitationally interact with each other. They yank on each other, slingshot each other, so that one of them is ejected from the planetary system, voted off the island, if you will.
If you were, unfortunately, a resident on a planet that was kicked out by a collision or a near collision with another large object, you'd probably rapidly move out of the habitable zone.
There are hundreds of billions of these lost, wayward, poor, wandering planets out in our Milky Way galaxy with no parent star to warm them up.
Cold, dark, quiet. Because planemos have no sun, they are worlds without days or years. They keep vigil through an eternal night. Planemos are solitary wanderers, sentinels of the galaxy. Just because it's out there drifting in space doesn't mean a planemo is dead.
If the planemo is a rocky world, it could well have life on it.
A small rocky planemo without an atmosphere will slumber in extreme cold, far colder than the coldest winter day on our own South Pole. But a planemo large enough to retain an atmosphere traps the heat generated when the planet was first formed. It is the ultimate greenhouse effect. The heat and energy comes from the molten core deep inside the lonely planet. If the planemo is a gas giant like Jupiter, it may have a system of moons. The gravitational pull between the planemo and its moons creates friction, causing the interior of the moons to stay warm.
These moons could also have life on them, in the same way that Jupiter's moon Io has volcanoes and has a lot of heat energy being generated by interactions with Jupiter and the other moons.
If anything lives here, it will be single cells, like common bacteria found on Earth. Not complex life forms. Without a sun to provide photosynthesis, these tiny organisms derive their energy from the chemistry in the soil of the planemo, or its moon. On Earth, there are similar conditions. Colonies of bacteria are found deep within mine shafts in South Africa. They have no access to oxygen nor light, and survive entirely on the chemicals they make from the surrounding dirt. Their metabolisms are extremely slow, and they reproduce only once every 1,000 years. If life dwells on a sunless planemo, it could be organisms like them, marooned when their planet was young. While planemos slumber undisturbed, there are worse places to be in the universe. Like in the company of this lethal pulsar, some 980 light years from Earth, in the constellation of Virgo. From afar, a pulsar looks like a blinking light. But up close, pulsars machine gun their surroundings with deadly radiation. They are no place for planets. Yet something interferes with the precision of this pulsar. One explanation is that the anomaly is caused by a planet. But many astronomers are skeptical that planets orbiting a pulsar can exist.
The reason that's a problem is because pulsars are formed in these incredible explosions.
When a red giant star explodes, a titanic fireball known as a supernova unleashes as much energy in 1 minute as our sun generates in its lifetime.
When a star goes supernova, the shockwave is so immense it's hard to imagine any planet surviving that.
When the cosmic dust clears, all that remains is the crushed core of the red giant, pulsing in the heart of an expanding debris field. Matter blasted from the colossal explosion falls back to the pulsar and forms a disk. Within this chaos, a new world arises, born of fire and destruction, a planetary zombie raised from the carcass of the former red giant star.
It's amazing that planets could form in that environment.
A planet orbiting a pulsar will give you the feeling of being in a disco bar with a very strong strobe light, which is the pulsar.
Radiation from this stellar beast breaks down the organic molecules needed for life.
The pulsar has these very strong magnetic fields that are being spun around as the star is rotating quickly, and it's picking up any material, electrons, protons, and speeding them up and slinging them out at high speed. So it's like a solar wind with a vengeance.
I can't imagine that there would be much of an opportunity for even simple life, microbial life, to emerge and to flourish on a planet around a pulsar. Largely because if you were in the pulse, you'd be severely energized, and if you were not in the pulse, you would be completely devoid of energy.
The discovery of pulsar planets shows how new worlds can form in the wake of a star's destruction. No matter where a planet arises, the process of its birth is fraught with danger. Sometimes, the violence is so great, the end of the world comes before the beginning. 2007. Astronomers using the giant Gemini North telescope make a strange discovery in the Pleiades cluster some 400 light-years from Earth. A star known only by its catalog number, HD 23514, is surrounded by a giant donut-shaped cloud of dust and gas. The star in the middle of the donut shape is about 100 million years old. A cosmic toddler in astronomical terms. Our sun is 45 times older. The conditions are perfect for planets to form. But spectral analysis finds something strange. The dust is utterly pulverized. Typically, a newborn star is surrounded by fledgling planets.
Planets form around the young star in a protoplanetary disk of gas and dust. And then these planets go on their merry way orbiting the star, not realizing that they're in an orbit that's too close to another planet.
Millions of years ago, two primordial planets orbiting HD 23514 are spinning toward doom. As the two worlds close in, tidal forces torque each planet from spheres to egg shapes. Nothing remains. The two worlds are annihilated, creating the dust and debris seen around star HD 23514. 4 billion years ago, a similar apocalypse came to Earth. A Mars-sized planet forms in roughly the same orbit as the newborn Earth. Like the planets at HD 23514, Earth and this Mars-sized body are barreling toward each other.
If you happen to be unlucky enough to be standing on a growing planet when it was in the process of still becoming the Earth, you might wake up one morning and notice that the sky was getting darker and darker as a Mars-sized body was coming at you within a period of less than an hour.
And when it hits, the shock wave is felt all over the planet, scouring the surface of the Earth. The collision obliterates one side of the planet. Molten rock sprays out into space. The entire globe is peppered by meteors and noxious vapor.
It would actually make hell look like a Bahamas vacation.
The debris field from the collision coalesces and forms our moon. It is a new beginning for our planet.
Collisions are part of the birth process for planetary systems. Building a terrestrial planet is probably all about colliding pieces of rock together.
And all across the galaxy, colliding pieces of rock are forming terrestrial worlds that defy the imagination.
There is a new planet out there, a planet we were not aware of existing before.
It is not just one planet. It is a new type of planet. Earth on steroids.
I like to call them super Earths. They're just like the Earth, except bigger, up to about 10 times the mass of the Earth. One family that the super Earths resemble just like our own Earth. Continents, oceans. Some of them may be very dry, like Mars. And then another family that we call water worlds or ocean planets that are completely covered with water.
Welcome to Gliese 581c.
This planet was found by Michel Mayor, and it orbits with 2 other planets around a very small star.
It's only 20 light years away in the constellation of Libra and is one of the smallest terrestrial planets found beyond our solar system. That doesn't mean Gliese 581c is small. It's still a super-Earth with 5 times the mass of our home planet. But it's the possibility of liquid water that excites scientists.
An ocean planet feels like being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, with no land in sight, just water, puffy white clouds and blue sky above you. The winds on the ocean world are going to be similar to that of the Earth, so it will be a very good place to sail.
The weather's absolutely perfect. Every day you get a clear blue sky and the sun just stays in the same place. Now how's that for weather prediction?
No land anywhere. Even miles beneath the surface.
This water layer would extend very far down, at least a quarter of the way down in the planet.
But as we dive deeper into the sea, the pressure builds. At 35,000 feet below the surface, we pass the point where the deepest oceans on Earth bottom out. We pass the 100,000-foot mark. The pressure is so great, water itself begins to take on surprising new forms. At a depth of 10 times the greatest ocean depth on Earth, we reach the bottom.
when you have a large amount of water, then at the bottom of an ocean, you will form very high pressure in excess of 1 million atmospheres. And that pressure will compress the liquid water, that is the ocean, into a state which we call ice 7.
No, it's not like ice in your refrigerator. The molecules of water that are in the ice in your refrigerator are kind of all jumbled up. But if you form ice under very high pressure, then the water molecules can become ordered, they can become aligned.
I can show you a crystal that is a very good analog to ice 7. This is halite, also known commonly as rock salt.
Ice 7 may exist within our own solar system. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, could possibly have a mantle of liquid water surrounded by a thick, icy crust. The pressure from the crust is so great that Ice 7 might exist deep within these uncharted seas. If we scale up and thaw out Europa, it could be a water world similar to Gliese 581c.
One could imagine that life could emerge on a water world. After all, water is essential to life on Earth.
Everywhere on Earth where there is water, there is life. You cannot find a sterile drop of water on Earth unless you put it in the microwave yourself.
On this water world, there could be bacteria or any kind of life in the ocean itself.
But not all of the super-Earths are water worlds teeming with life.
When we talk about super-Earths, we talked about two major families of mostly rocky with some water and mostly water with an endless ocean. But one has to add to those a third family of probably very rare super-Earths and Earth-like planets, which are called carbon planets.
A carbon planet is unlike anything we've ever seen anywhere. A place with an alien chemistry, but loaded with very earthly treasures. Throughout our galaxy, there are planets barren and poor and inhospitable. But science is on the trail of a new type of planet, an entire world of treasure.
In our own solar system, in our sun and in all the stars nearby, there's always more oxygen than carbon. But if we think of a place in the universe where there's more carbon than oxygen, then planet formation is very different.
Spectral analysis shows carbon to be far more plentiful, 26,000 light-years away near the center of our galaxy. Planets that form here may contain a rich abundance of carbon. The morning sky on a carbon world would be anything but crystal clear and blue.
I'm picturing a yellow haze with black clouds of soot. And as you descended farther down in the atmosphere, I could imagine lakes that were made out of compounds like methane or gasoline. I'm picturing these bubbling, foul-smelling pits of black ooze, like an oil well.
With little or no water in the atmosphere, the air is made of carbon compounds.
Methane, butane, pentane, benzene, all these different kinds of carbon compounds that separate out when you refine gasoline. One day it might be raining benzene. The next day it might be raining butane.
Alien as carbon planets might seem, the air quality could be familiar to some.
The air in a very benzene-rich planet will resemble that of LA. A lot of smog particles that unfortunately we are quite used to from the exhaust of cars.
Despite the pollution, carbon planets could come with a sparkling upside.
You might see diamond because the planet may have substantial quantities of pure carbon that it's formed out of. And pure carbon, when you compress it, tends to form into diamond.
The secrets of exotic planets like these are waiting to be discovered all across the galaxy. But astronomers won't be satisfied until they find the Holy Grail. A planet like our own, one that sustains life, the next Earth.
People always ask me, do I think we're going to find another planet like Earth? And I answer, absolutely.
Every star probably has planets roughly the same size as our Earth.
We think that essentially every star has several Earth mass or super Earth mass planets. So if you have, say, 200 billion stars in the galaxy, that may mean there are 400 billion Earths in the galaxy or more.
400 billion Earths. The Kepler Space Observatory is the first instrument capable of finding one of these planets.
Kepler is looking at the constellation Cygnus in the night sky at 100,000 stars, taking picture after picture after picture, minute after minute. And the goal of Kepler is simple: to look for stars among the 100,000 that dim.
When a star dims slightly, it means a planet passes in front, blocking some of the light. How long the star dims and how much light gets blocked will tell scientists about the size of the planet and the distance from its sun.
A good analogy for this is looking for the dip in the light that you would see from a searchlight if a small moth flew across the searchlight. And so it's a really tiny dip in the light as the planet transits.
It is a very powerful technique because it allows you to discover planets that are even smaller than the size of the Earth around stars similar to the Sun.
It is a technique that is changing the course of science.
We think we may be able to find a planet that is habitable in the next few years.
Scientists estimate the Kepler mission will find a minimum of 50 alien Earths.
One of the big questions that anybody looking for life beyond the Earth is facing today is, what if we don't recognize life even though we discover it?
Conditions on an alien Earth may cause life to evolve differently.
My hope is that we'll see some sign that will make our hairs stand up on the back of our necks.
Whatever that sign is, it will be the first chapter on the greatest scientific story ever told.